Gertrude Whitacre circled the words so hard the pen nearly punched through the paper. Gunman behind you. In the amber hush of La Meridiana, 3 circles became a death sentence or a lifeline. Luciano Alvarez read them without blinking. Then he looked at the woman who had just signed both their names in blood. She had served him for 31 months and had never once let their hands touch. Tonight she broke that rule on purpose. Across the dining room, Luciano sat in the same booth he always claimed back to brick, eyes on both exits, spine never touching the leather behind him. Men twice his size rearranged their lives so this one man could dine undisturbed. The sommelier kept a single bottle of 2016 Macedo breathing at exactly 62 degrees Fahrenheit. The bussers polished his water glass twice. Even the jazz trio lowered their volume 2 notches when his driver texted, 2 minutes out. Children stopped asking for dessert. The air itself seemed to thin, the way it does at altitude, because oxygen felt like a privilege around Luciano Alvarez. His hands rested on the white tablecloth, manicured, motionless, the kind of hands that could initial a shipping manifest or sign a death warrant with the same fluid stroke. Tips arrived in crisp hundreds, edges aligned like soldiers. No one ever saw him count them. Outside, Chicago rain slashed sideways across Rush Street, smearing the gold lights into bleeding streaks on the windows. Thursday, the 19th of November, 2025, another night that was supposed to end with Gertrude locking up at 1, riding the red line home, and forgetting the faces of men who owned the dark. Then the stranger walked in. No reservation. No glance at the host stand. Coat dripping, shoes too clean for the weather, he took the last stool at the service bar and ordered a Macallan 18 neat that he never tasted. Gertrude clocked the bulge under his left armpit from 20 feet away, the way his right hand never left his pocket, the way his eyes never quite landed on Luciano, but always knew exactly where he was. Reflection in the back bar mirror gave him away, pupils blown wide, the faint tremor of a man riding the last seconds before violence. She knew that tremor. Her brother had come home from Helmand with it. Gertrude's pulse hammered so hard she felt it in her teeth. Ignore it and clock out alive. Write nothing and pretend she was invisible again. She chose the third option. Approaching the booth, she laid the leather folder beside his untouched espresso. Their fingers brushed deliberate, electric. For the first time in 31 months, his gaze lifted fully to hers, gray and depthless, a winter lake with bodies underneath. At the bottom of the receipt, circled hard enough to tear the paper. Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now. Luciano's eyes flicked down, then back to her. No surprise, no gratitude. Just the tiniest tightening at the corner of his mouth, acknowledgement, not fear. He slid his saucer over the message, tapped once with his index finger, and drained the espresso in a single motion. Gertrude turned away, polishing a glass that was already spotless, counting heartbeats. 4 seconds later, the stranger's stool scraped back. Wood crashed against marble. A champagne flute shattered somewhere near the kitchen doors, then the cough of a suppressed round, low and intimate, like a secret being told too fast. The jazz kept playing. A muted trumpet cried over whatever had just died in the corridor. And Gertrude knew, with the clarity of a woman watching her old life end, that one circled warning had just bought her a future she never asked for. The trumpet solo never missed a beat. It wailed on, bright and oblivious, while the first real sound of death in La Meridiana was nothing more than a polite cough. Gertrude's hand froze on the bar rag. The glass she had been polishing reflected the room in warped miniature. White tablecloths, crystal stems, the amber halo of pendant lights, and then suddenly motion. The stranger's stool toppled backward with a crack that cut through the jazz like a snapped bone. Conversation died mid-sentence. A woman's fork hung in the air, suspended between plate and lipstick. The stranger was already moving, coat flaring, right hand rising from his pocket with the smooth certainty of a man who had practiced this exact draw 1,000 times in front of a mirror. But Luciano was no longer in the booth. He was already gone. Two men, Gertrude had served 100 times, men who always ordered the same Negronis, who tipped in 50s, who never spoke to anyone, rose from separate tables as if pulled by invisible strings. No shouting, no frantic scrambling. Just fluid, terrible purpose. One flicked his jacket open, the other was already sliding sideways through the velvet rope that separated the dining room from the service corridor. The stranger pivoted, tracking Luciano's absence, and that half-second of confusion cost him everything. Pop. Not a bang. Not a roar. A suppressed round sounds almost apologetic, like a champagne cork in another room. The stranger's shoulder jerked backward. His gun matte black, stubby silencer clattered across the marble and spun to rest against a diner's Ferragamo loafer. The man who owned the loafer stared at it the way civilians stare at rattlesnakes. Fascinated, paralyzed, already rewriting his evening plans. A second cough. The stranger dropped to one knee, blood blooming dark across the white of his shirt. He looked almost surprised, as if death had arrived early and underdressed. Gertrude's body moved before her mind caught up. She dropped behind the bar, knees slamming into the rubber mat, shoulder blades pressed hard against the cabinet that held the good bourbon. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Above her, bottles rattled like wind chimes in a storm she couldn't see. Glass shattered somewhere deeper in the restaurant kitchen, doors swinging violently, plates hitting tile. A woman screamed once, high and sharp, then thought better of it. Footsteps thundered past the bar, close enough that she smelled the metallic tang of gunpowder threading through the air. Someone barked an order in low, rapid Italian. Another voice, calm, almost bored, answered. Portalo fuori dal retro. Take him out the back. She counted heartbeats. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. She had learned that from her brother after his third tour. When the world explodes, count until the echo stops, then decide if you're still alive. At 7 Mississippi, the running stopped. At 9, the jazz trio finally faltered, the pianist's hands hovering over the keys, as if the notes had been stolen from him. Silence pooled, thick and obscene. Gertrude risked a breath. The scent of blood and truffle oil braided together in a way that made her stomach lurch. She eased upward just enough to peer over the bar. The dining room looked staged for a crime scene photo. Chairs askew, a purse spilled across the floor, lipstick rolling in slow circles. One table's candle had tipped, wax bled red down the white cloth like a fresh wound. The stranger was gone. Only a dark smear on the marble and a single abandoned shoe remained, brown leather, polished, now ruined. Luciano's men were already resetting the world. One stood at the front door, smiling the tight, professional smile of a maitre denouncing a seating delay. Folks, I'm terribly sorry, looks like we've blown a circuit in the kitchen. For your safety, we'll need to evacuate the dining room immediately. Your meals are on the house tonight, of course. Another guided patrons toward the exit with gentle, implacable hands on elbows. A hedge fund manager argued about his coat check. A socialite clutched her pearls and whispered about lawsuits. No one looked back at the blood. Gertrude stayed crouched. Her legs had gone numb. She watched through the gap beneath the bar as 2 more men in suits emerged from the kitchen corridor, rolling a stainless steel prep cart. On it lay a black body bag, zipped to the throat, already dripping. They moved with the practiced efficiency of caterers clearing a banquet table. One paused to straighten a fallen chair. The other flicked off the dining room lights as casually as if the night were simply over. The cart disappeared through the service door behind the wine cellar. 30 seconds later, she heard the soft thud of a van door closing, the low growl of an engine, tires hissing away on wet pavement. Then nothing. The jazz trio packed up without a word. The pianist gave her a single, wide-eyed glance before vanishing. The lights dimmed to emergency red. Somewhere, a sprinkler hissed once, then thought better of it. Gertrude stayed behind the bar long after the last patron had been shepherded into the rain. She counted to 300, then to 500, then gave up and simply breathed until her lungs stopped shaking. When she finally stood, the restaurant felt hollowed out, a stage after the actors have taken their bows and left the corpses in place. The blood smear had already been mopped, someone had worked fast. Only a faint pink shadow remained, like a ghost that hadn't decided whether to haunt or forgive. She walked the length of the dining room on legs that didn't feel like hers, past Luciano's booth. The leather folder still lay where she had placed it. Inside, the receipt was gone. In its place, a single crisp $100 bill folded once, precisely, into a perfect square. She left it there. Some debts you don't collect. In the staff corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects. The kitchen was immaculate again. Someone had bleached the floors until they gleamed. A lone prep cook smoked by the open back door, staring out at the alley as if he'd never seen rain before. He didn't look at her when she passed. Her locker waited at the far end of the changing room, metal dented from years of slammed doors and broken dreams. The combination hadn't changed since her first week. 220719. Her brother's birthday. She spun the dial with fingers that still trembled. The door creaked open. Inside, her purse, her street shoes, her hoodie that smelled faintly of citrus polish and desperation. And something new. A black envelope, heavy cotton paper, no writing on the outside. It rested on top of her folded apron like it belonged there. Like it had always been waiting. Gertrude's pulse, which had only just settled, kicked hard again. She glanced over her shoulder. The corridor was empty. The cook's cigarette smoke drifted in lazy spirals under the exit sign. She picked up the envelope. It was sealed with a dot of crimson wax, no crest, no symbol, just a perfect circle pressed into the wax like a period at the end of a death threat. Inside, a silver coin, thick as a casino chip, edges milled. One side blank. The other engraved with a single letter in severe, elegant script. Beneath it, a white card. 10 digits written in black fountain pen. No area code, no name. Just the number and, underneath, 3 words in the same precise hand. When you're ready. She stood there a long time, rain drumming on the corrugated awning outside, the silver token cold against her palm. Somewhere in the distance, a siren rose and fell, chasing ghosts through the wet streets. Gertrude closed the locker. She slipped the token into the pocket of her jeans, the card into her bra closest to the heart, hardest to steal, and pulled her hoodie on like armor. There was no going back. She had known that the moment the pen left her hand. But knowing and feeling are 2 different countries, and tonight she had crossed the border without a passport. She stepped out into the alley. The rain had softened to a cold mist that tasted of the lake. The service van was long gone. Only puddles remained, reflecting the red exit sign in fractured bloodlight. Gertrude tilted her face to the sky, let the mist wash the gunpowder from her skin, and started walking. Behind her, La Meridiana went dark, window by window, until the only light left was the one burning behind her eyes, the image of gray winter lake eyes, meeting hers across a tablecloth, and the unspoken promise that whatever came next would not let her go. The red line rattled north through the rain-slick dark, windows streaked with neon that bled and vanished like half-remembered dreams. Gertrude sat alone in the last car, hood up, silver token pressed cold against her thigh through the denim. Every jolt of the train felt like a replay. The cough of the suppressor, the stranger's shoe left behind, the way Luciano's eyes had met hers without blinking. She got off at Thorndale and walked the 8 blocks to her apartment with the mist needling her face. The building was pre-war brick, buzzer broken since the Clinton administration, hallway smelling of boiled cabbage and cheap detergent. She locked the deadbolt, chain, and the secondary slide she'd installed herself after the third break-in on the floor. Then she stood in the dark living room, afraid to turn on the light, afraid the night would follow her inside. Sleep never came. She lay on the couch, fully dressed, boots still on, staring at the ceiling cracks that looked like lightning frozen mid-flash. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the stranger's shoulder jerk, heard the soft, wet thud of a body hitting marble. Around 4 a.m. She gave up, brewed coffee she didn't drink, and watched the sky over Lake Michigan turn the color of old bruises. By 6:30, she was back on the street, walking south because sitting still felt like waiting for the second bullet. The city was waking in reluctant grays, delivery trucks idling, garbage men shouting in Spanish, a homeless vet saluting the flag that wasn't there. Gertrude kept her hands in her pockets, and the token in her fist like a talisman or a handcuff. La Meridiana didn't open until 4 on Fridays, but the staff door was already propped with a bucket when she arrived at 9:15. Inside, the dining room looked virginal again. Tables reset, floors waxed, not a trace of blood or chaos. Only the faint smell of bleach underneath the citrus polish betrayed what had happened 12 hours earlier. She was hanging her coat in the staff room when she felt the temperature drop. Luciano Alvarez stood in the doorway between kitchen and dining room, hands clasped behind his back, black overcoat, unbuttoned despite the cold. No bodyguards visible. Just him, filling the space the way an eclipse fills the sky. Gertrude's heart slammed once, hard, against her ribs. He didn't speak at first. He studied her the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, curious, clinical, already calculating incisions. "You're early," he said. Voice low, precise, the accent almost erased but not quite. Midwestern vowels over Italian consonants. "So are you." A flicker at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "I own the building, I decide what early is." She moved past him toward the bar, meeting the counter between them. He let her. When she reached for the light switch, he said, "Leave them off." And she did. Amber emergency lights painted everything bronze and shadow. Luciano walked the length of the dining room slowly, fingertips trailing across tablecloths, testing the alignment of silverware. He stopped at his usual booth, sat exactly where he had the night before, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Then he looked at her. "You noticed him," he said. "The shooter." "How?" Gertrude's mouth went dry. She busied herself with coffee filters that didn't need changing. Lucky angle from the service bar. "No." Calm, almost gentle. "People with lucky angles freeze or scream. You wrote me a warning. How did you know he was wrong?" She hesitated. The truth felt too private, like handing him the key to every locked room inside her. But lying to this man seemed as pointless as lying to gravity. "My brother was 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. 2 tours Helmand, 1 Fallujah. When he came home, he couldn't sit with his back to doors either. Said the ones who wanted to kill you always had a certain look right before, hands too still, breathing too even. Like the air around them got heavier." She met Luciano's eyes. "Your shooter had that look. And he was breathing like my brother did the week before he ate his service pistol." Silence stretched, thick enough to choke on. Luciano didn't flinch, didn't offer condolences, didn't avert his gaze. He simply absorbed the information the way other men absorb sunlight. "His name was Marco Rossi," he said finally. "Contract out of Detroit, 50,000 wired from an account I recognize." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "The money came from someone who knows my habits, someone who sat at this table." Gertrude felt the floor tilt. "I'm sorry, truly. But I'm not part of your war. You were the moment you touched that pen." He reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and laid the receipt on the table between them. Her handwriting stared up at her, circles dark and accusing. "Tell me everything you saw." She did. The shooter's shoes too new for the weather. The way his left hand kept brushing the napkin dispenser like he was counting seconds. The man at table 12 who watched the shooter instead of his date. The cufflink on the sommelier that caught the light wrong gold octopus, tentacles wrapping the letter V. She hadn't even known she'd cataloged half of it until the words spilled out. Luciano listened without moving. When she finished, he exhaled once, quietly. "You see more than my security detail," he said. "And they are paid to see." "I see, because I was taught to be invisible," she answered. "Invisible people notice everything. It's how we stay alive." He stood. The overhead spots hadn't come on yet, but the morning light through the front windows carved his face into sharp, aristocratic angles. "I can protect you," he said. "I don't want your protection. I want last night erased." "That is not an option." He stepped closer, close enough that she smelled cedar and gun oil. "You saved my life. In my world, that is a debt measured in blood, but it also makes you a loose thread. Some of my men already believe you were planted to earn my trust. Others think you simply know too much." His voice dropped. "Both opinions end with you in the river." Gertrude's knees threatened to fold. She locked them. "Then let me disappear. New city. New name. I'll vanish so completely. You would last 72 hours. Flat, factual. Maybe less." He reached into his pocket again. This time he produced the silver token she already carried. He placed it on the bar between them, heads up so the engraved A faced her like an accusation. "You are a piece on the board now, Gertrude Whitacre. The only question is whose side you stand on when the next move is made." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Use the number when you're ready to stay alive. Do not wait too long." Then he was gone, the bell above the door giving one soft chime, mocking chime. The rest of the day passed in fragments. She prepped the bar on autopilot, limes cut into perfect eighths, mint bruised just enough, glasses polished until they disappeared. Co-workers asked if she was okay. She lied and said, "Food poisoning." Tips felt like blood money. Every clink of ice sounded like suppressed gunfire. At shift's end, she walked home a different route, cutting through alleys, doubling back twice. The silver token burned against her thigh. The city felt predatory tonight, headlights too bright, shadows too long. Half a block from her building she saw him. A man in a dark peacoat, collar up, leaning against the lamppost opposite her entrance. Smoking a cigarette he never put to his lips. When she slowed, he flicked the cigarette away and started across the street toward her, unhurried. Gertrude's pulse spiked so hard her vision tunneled. She spun, walked fast the other way, faster. Footsteps followed, measured, patient, not trying to catch her yet, just reminding her she was prey. She ducked into a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee she didn't drink, sat with her back to the wall for 40 minutes. When she risked leaving, the man was gone. But the message had been delivered. She climbed the 3 flights to her apartment with keys clenched between her fingers like claws. Inside, she locked every lock, dragged the dresser in front of the door, and sat on the floor with her brother's old kabar across her lap. The black card with the phone number lay on the coffee table, catching the streetlight in slanted bars. 10 digits. "When you're ready." Gertrude stared at it until the numbers blurred. Outside, a car engine idled too long, then pulled away. She didn't sleep again. The days after Luciano's visit did not pass. They oozed. Gertrude moved through them like a woman underwater, every motion slow, every sound muffled, every breath tasting of rust. She kept the silver token in her front jeans pocket now, edges worn smooth from the constant rub of her thumb. A worry stone or a noose, she hadn't decided. Sleep fractured into 20-minute shards. At 2:14 a.m., a black town car idled across from her building, exhaust curling white in the cold. At 3:07, it pulled away only to be replaced by a gray Suburban with tinted plates. They never parked in the same spot twice, never left their headlights on longer than necessary. Just enough to remind her that someone was always counting her heartbeats. At La Meridiana, the questions started small. A new regular broad shoulders, broken nose, Rolex that looked stolen sat at the corner of the bar every night she worked. Ordered the same Macallan 18 the dead hitman had never tasted. Never drank it. "You were here Thursday, right?" he asked on the second night, voice soft, almost friendly. Heard there was some excitement. "Electrical problem," she answered, repeating the official line. Her hand steady pouring his soda water. He smiled with too many teeth. Funny. Looked more like a plumbing issue. Lot of red in the water. She didn't flinch, but the soda fizzed over the rim and onto his knuckles. He didn't move to wipe it off, just watched her face while the liquid ran between his fingers like blood. By the fifth night, the staff had stopped asking if she was okay. They simply gave her the side eye that civilians reserve for people who have started glowing radioactive. Then came Victor. Victor Rossi, no relation to the dead shooter, or so he claimed was Luciano's capo bastone, his right hand, the man who decided which problems disappeared and which ones got fed to the lake in pieces. 6'4", former middleweight, neck thicker than most men's thighs. He arrived an hour before close on a slow Tuesday, took the same booth Luciano favored, and waited. When she approached with the leather folder, he didn't open it. "You're Gertrude," he said. Not a question. She nodded once. "Boss says you got eyes." He leaned forward, forearms like bridge cables on the tablecloth. "I say anybody with eyes that good don't just grow 'em overnight. Somebody plants 'em." "I'm not." "Save it." His voice never rose. That was the worst part. Pretty girl pours drinks in the boss's favorite place for 3 years. Never late, never sick, never talks. Then one night she saves his life with a fucking receipt. He let the silence do the screaming for him. "You tell me how that smells." "Like coincidence," she said. Victor smiled the way a shark smiles. Coincidence gets people buried under new construction. He left $100 bill folded into the shape of a noose. The next afternoon, she went to Jewel-Osco for milk and cereal, anything to keep her out of the apartment, anything to pretend the world still had aisles and fluorescent lights and normal people arguing over coupons. She was reaching for a box of Cheerios when she felt it, the prickle at the base of her skull, the same one she'd felt Thursday night right before the stranger moved. She turned. A man in a Cubs cap pulled low stood 3 aisles over, pretending to read the back of a soup can. Same height as the smoker outside her building. Same stillness. Her chest tightened. The overhead lights suddenly too bright, the air too thin. She left the basket in the middle of the cereal aisle and walked fast toward the exit, heart jackhammering so hard her vision pulsed at the edges. In the parking lot, she made it halfway to the bus stop before the panic crested. She sagged against a concrete pillar, palms pressed to her eyes, trying to breathe through the static in her lungs. Someone walked past slow, deliberate footsteps and paused just long enough for her to smell the cigarette before moving on. She didn't look up. Couldn't. By the time she got home, her hands shook too badly to fit the key in the lock. Inside, she sat on the kitchen floor with her back to the cabinets and stared at the black card on the counter until the numbers burned themselves into her retinas. She dialed before the fear could talk her out of it. 1 ring. "Say 2. Luciano's voice, calm as deep water. "I'm ready," she whispered. "Good. Corner of Halstead and Wrightwood, 10 minutes. Black Escalade. Get in the back. Do not look at the driver." Click. She was already moving. The Escalade idled under a broken street lamp, engine purring like a leopard. Rear door opened from the inside before she touched the handle. She slid across leather that smelled new and expensive. The door shut. A hood-thick black cloth came down over her head, smelling faintly of cedar and gun oil. "Hands on your knees," a voice said. Not Luciano. Younger, rougher. "You move them, I break them." The SUV pulled away smooth and silent. No acceleration squeals, no sudden turns. Professionals. She counted seconds like her brother had taught her, tried to map the route by sound and motion. Left onto Fullerton, right onto some expressway, the low thrum of tires over seams. 43 minutes. Maybe 45. When the vehicle finally stopped, the hood came off. She was in an underground garage, concrete pillars, low ceiling, a single sodium lamp painting everything jaundice yellow. 3 men waited, suits dark, faces unreadable. Luciano stood apart from them, overcoat open, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak until the others had patted her down with impersonal efficiency, phone confiscated, pockets turned out, the silver token lifted from her palm and handed to him like contraband. Only when they stepped back did he approach. "You look tired," he said. "I am tired." Her voice cracked on the second word. She hated it. Luciano studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out slow enough that she could have stepped away and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear with the same fingers that signed death warrants. "Your ordinary life ended the moment you circled those words," he said quietly. "Tonight the rest of it burns." He turned and started walking toward a steel door at the far end of the garage. The 3 men fell in around her, not touching, but close enough that escape was a fairy tale. Gertrude followed because there was nowhere else to go. Behind her, the Escalade's engine turned over once and went silent, taking the last of the outside world with it. She crossed the threshold into a corridor lit by red bulbs, footsteps echoing like gunshots in the hollow dark. The steel door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. Somewhere above them, Chicago kept breathing, buses hissing, couples arguing, sirens chasing ghosts through the rain. Down here, Gertrude Whitacre disappeared. And whatever stepped out the other side would no longer be the woman who once poured drinks and dreamed of invisibility. The steel door sealed behind her with a hiss of hydraulics and the finality of a bank vault. Fluorescent tubes buzzed to life overhead, cold and surgical, revealing a corridor of raw concrete that smelled of damp and cordite. 2 of the suited men peeled off without a word, disappearing through side doors that closed just as silently. The third stayed at her back, close enough that she felt the heat of him, far enough that she couldn't see the gun she knew was there. Luciano never looked back to check if she followed. He simply expected the world to fall in line. They descended another level, metal stairs spiraling down like the inside of a rifle barrel until the air grew thicker, warmer, laced with the faint bite of cigar smoke and heated electronics. At the bottom, a final door opened into a room that made Gertrude's breath stall in her throat. It was half war room, half fortress. One wall was nothing but screens, 24 of them, arranged in a grid, cycling through feeds. The restaurant, the alley behind it, her apartment building's lobby, the Red Line platform at Thorndale, even the Jewel Osco parking lot where she'd collapsed 2 days ago. Another wall held maps of Chicago covered in red string and Polaroids, pushpins forming constellations of violence. A long steel table ran the length of the room, scattered with burner phones, disassembled handguns, bricks of cash vacuum-sealed in plastic, and a single crystal tumbler holding 2 fingers of something amber. 4 men stood around the table. They didn't look up when she entered. They didn't need to. The room already knew she was prey. Luciano shrugged out of his overcoat, draped it over a chair with the care of a man hanging a suit that cost more than most cars. Underneath, he wore a charcoal three-piece vest buttoned, tie still perfect at 2 in the morning. He moved to the head of the table and touched a remote. One screen froze on a still image. La Meridiana's dining room, Thursday night, 10:47 p.m. The exact moment she had placed the leather folder beside his espresso. He zoomed in until her own face filled half the wall, eyes wide, lips parted, pen still in hand. "This," he said, voice soft enough that every man in the room leaned in, "is the woman who interfered." Gertrude felt the words like a brand. Luciano clicked again. A second image, the dead hitman Marco Rossi sitting at the service bar, hand in pocket, eyes orbiting Luciano's booth. Third image, a wire transfer screenshot, $50,000 from an account registered to a shell company in the Caymans. Fourth, an encrypted text string signal, end-to-end, time-stamped 3 hours before the attempt. From Redacted. 2. Marco Rossi. Target arrives 10:30. Booth 8. No witnesses. Luciano let the silence breathe. "The money came from inside my house," he said. "Someone who knows I always take booth 8. Someone who knows I drink espresso, never coffee. Someone who sat at my table last Christmas and called me fratello." His fingers drummed once on the table 4 taps, precise as a metronome. "Someone I trusted." He turned to her then, and the weight of his attention was physical. "But that is not why you are here." Another click. A dozen new photographs bloomed across the screens, grainy stills pulled from the restaurant's own security feeds. Table 12. The man with the octopus cufflink watching her instead of his date. Table 5. A captain from the Northside cruise staring at her hands while she circled the warning. The host stand, Victor Rossi himself, eyes tracking her path to Luciano's booth. "7 men in that room that night were not watching me," Luciano said. "They were watching you. Waiting to see what you would do. Waiting for confirmation that you were either a threat or leverage." Gertrude's knees loosened. She locked them hard. "I am known for tying loose ends," he continued. "Tonight there is talk on the street. They call you La Donna che ha interferito. The woman who interfered. By morning, there will be a price on your head higher than the one on mine." One of the suited men slid a folder across the table. Inside, a single sheet of paper, already printed. Wanted. Gertrude Lee Whitacre. Last seen. Edgewater. $250,000 alive. $100,000 dead. No questions asked. The photograph was her Illinois driver's license. Someone had gotten it from the DMV in under 72 hours. Luciano watched her face while she read it. "I need an outsider," he said quietly. "Someone whose name is not already in my enemies' mouths. Someone who sees what my men cannot because they are too close, too proud, too blind." You noticed Marco Rossi in a room full of killers. You noticed the cufflink, the shoes, the breathing. I need those eyes, Gertrude. I need them until the traitor is ash. She found her voice somewhere under the terror. No. The single word cracked in the air like ice. I'm not your soldier. I'm not your spy. I'm a bartender who made one stupid choice. You made the choice the moment you picked up the pen, he answered. The question is whether you die for it alone, or live long enough to watch the man who wants you dead burn first. He stepped closer, close enough that the overhead light carved shadows under his cheekbones, turned his eyes into winter water again. I can put you on a train tonight. New name, new city, 50,000 in cash. You walk away, you vanish. I will not stop you. He let that sit for 3 heartbeats. But they will find you. Not tomorrow, not next week. But they will find you. And when they do, I will not stop them unless you stand with me now. The room held its breath. Even the screens seemed to dim. Gertrude looked at the maps, the guns, the bounty sheet with her own face staring back. She looked at the men who would kill her without blinking and the man who might be the only thing standing between her and a hole in the ground. Her ordinary life, the apartment with the cracked ceiling, the red line at 6 a.m., the dream of one day owning a little house up in Michigan where no one knew her name slipped through her fingers like warm water and was gone. She felt it leave. Something inside her chest tore open, raw and bleeding, and in the hollow that remained she understood the terrible truth. The woman who had walked into this room blindfolded was already dead. Whatever came out the other side would be someone else entirely. Luciano watched the realization settle on her face, the way a chess player watches a pawn, finally comprehended has become a queen. "Decide," he said. Gertrude closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the trembling had stopped. "Show me the photographs again," she said. "All of them. From the beginning." Luciano's mouth curved, not a smile, but the acknowledgement of a debt finally claimed. He turned back to the screens. "Welcome to the board, Gertrude Whitacre." Somewhere far above them, Chicago kept spinning, taxis honking, couples fighting, the lake wind rattling windows that would never open for her again. Down here, in a room built for war, her old life ended with the quiet finality of a bullet sliding into a chamber. And the new one began. The safe house never slept. At 4:17 a.m., the screens still glowed, the coffee had turned to tar, and the air tasted of gun oil and sleeplessness. Gertrude sat at the steel table under a single gooseneck lamp, photographs fanned in front of her like tarot cards from hell. Luciano stood behind her chair, not touching, but close enough that she felt the heat of him through her sweater. "Again," he said, from the moment he walked in. She closed her eyes and let the restaurant rebuild itself in her head. Amber light, clink of crystal, the faint scent of white truffle. She walked the memory like a crime scene. Marco Rossi came through the front at 10:28. Coat was wet but shoes were dry. New soles, rubber, no scuffs. City slush would have marked them if he'd walked more than half a block. Someone dropped him at the door. She tapped a photo. He never looked at the host. Went straight to the service bar like he'd memorized the floor plan. One of the younger soldiers, Matteo, snorted. "We all know the floor plan." Gertrude ignored him. "He ordered Macallan neat, left-handed. But he's right-handed. Watch." She slid another still across the table, Rossi's right hand disappearing into his pocket the moment the glass arrived. Left hand on the bar for balance. Right hand already on the grip. He was counting seconds, not drinking. Luciano's fingers drummed once on the table. Approval or impatience, impossible to tell. She kept going. "When I moved toward your booth, 3 people tracked me, not you. Table 5 guy with the pinky ring, north side colors, his eyes flicked to me first, then to Victor." She laid a finger on Victor's frozen face in the photograph. Victor was watching the kitchen door, expecting Marco to come from there. Means Victor thought the hit would be loud, not suppressed. Means whoever told him the plan lied about the method. Victor, leaning against the far wall with arms folded, went very still. Gertrude felt the room's temperature drop 10 degrees. She pulled the cufflink photo closer. And this. A gold octopus, 8 tentacles curling around a black pearl. Table 12. Wore it on the left sleeve, only odd for vanity. Octopus means Versetti family out of Detroit. They've been quiet since the 21 truce. Quiet means planning. Luciano's voice cut through the hush. The Versettis don't move without permission. Someone gave them permission. Someone who profits if I'm gone and they take the lakefront. Silence rippled outward. Every man in the room suddenly had somewhere else to look. Matteo broke it. She's guessing, pulling details out of her ass to save her own skin. Gertrude turned the next photograph so he could see. Marco Rossi's shoes, extreme close-up. Size 11 Allen. Edmonds, cap-toe, bought 2 weeks ago from the Nordstrom on Michigan. Receipt was still in the box when your people stripped him. Paid cash, but the clerk remembers the buyer had a South Side accent and a fresh manicure. Your territory, not Detroit. She met Mateo's eyes. I don't guess. I notice. Luciano exhaled once, slow. Enough. He didn't raise his voice, but Mateo stepped back like he'd been slapped. For the first time, Luciano looked at Gertrude, the way a man looks at a loaded gun he isn't sure is pointed at him or for him. Coffee, he said to no one in particular. Someone brought her a fresh cup. Real cream, 2 sugars, exactly how she took it at the restaurant. She hadn't told anyone. Trust, but not fully. The message was clear. The next 48 hours collapsed into a gray smear of photographs, burner phones, and whispered arguments. Gertrude slept in 4-hour snatches on a cot in the corner, waking every time the steel door opened. Victor stopped speaking to her entirely. When their eyes met, it was with the flat hatred of a man who just realized the witness might outrank him. On the 3rd night, Luciano summoned her to a sit-down in a private dining room above a social club in Little Italy. Neutral ground, supposedly. 10 captains around a table long enough to land a plane on, cigar smoke hanging like fog over the lake. Gertrude stood behind Luciano's chair, close enough to advise, far enough to remind everyone she wasn't family. Yet. The meeting started routine. Territory lines, tribute numbers, a dispute over a union local. Then the lights flickered. Just once. A brownout, someone muttered. Luciano's hand moved a fraction under the table signal. 2 bodyguards shifted imperceptibly. Gertrude saw it first. The waiter pouring Brunello at the far end wasn't one of theirs. Wrong shoes again. This time Italian leather, hand-stitched, soles red as fresh blood. Louboutin. Versetti colors. Her pulse spiked, but she kept her voice level. Luciano. The Brunello is breathing wrong. He didn't ask how she knew. He simply pushed back his chair a 1/4 inch, the sign for everyone to stand away. The waiter reached inside his vest. Everything happened at once. Luciano flipped the table upward, mahogany exploding into splinters and crystal. Gunfire stuttered, suppressed again, professional. 2 captains went down before they cleared leather. Gertrude dropped, crawled through shattering glass, and spilled wine that smelled like blood. She came up behind the overturned table with the 38 Luciano had made her carry since yesterday. Her hands didn't shake. She sighted on the waiter's knee, non-lethal, information needed, and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the enclosed room. The waiter screamed, went down clutching his leg. Luciano's men swarmed, zip ties and fists. But not before Gertrude saw the cufflink on the wounded man. Gold octopus, 8 tentacles, black pearl. Versetti. When the smoke cleared, 3 dead, 4 wounded, and the waiter zip-tied to a radiator bleeding on antique Persian rug. Luciano crouched beside him, voice almost tender. Who paid you? The man spat blood. Ask your new whore. She's the one they want alive. Gertrude felt every eye turn to her. Luciano stood slowly. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Get her out. Now. They hustled her down the back stairs into a waiting SUV. Victor drove, knuckles white on the wheel. In the rearview his eyes were flat, murderous. Octopus was bait, he said. They wanted us to chase Detroit. Means the traitor's still inside. And now they know exactly how useful you are. The safe house, when they reached it, felt smaller. The walls pressed in. Luciano was already there, shirt soaked in someone else's blood, tie gone, eyes black with fatigue and calculation. He laid a new photograph on the table. Her apartment building, taken tonight, red circle around her window. Red X over the door. Third attempt in 6 days, he said. This one had your name on the bullet casing. Literally. GW etched in the brass. Gertrude stared at the photo until the edges blurred. They're not trying to kill you anymore, Luciano said quietly. They're trying to flush me out. You're the bait now, and the only way to pull you off the hook is to find the hand holding the rod before he reels us both in. He looked at her, then really looked, and for the first time the winter lake in his eyes cracked just enough to show something human underneath. I was wrong, he said. I don't need your eyes anymore. I need you alive. And the only way that happens is if we gut this thing tonight. Victor stepped forward, voice dripping acid. She's the leak, boss. Open your eyes. Luciano didn't even glance at him. She just saved my life for the second time. You will guard her with yours, or I will find someone who will. The threat hung in the air like cordite. Gertrude felt the web tighten until it cut skin. The invisible enemy had a face now. She could feel it watching, waiting for her to make the next move that would damn them all. She looked at the photograph of her building one last time, then pushed it away. Show me the guest list from the sit-down, she said. Every name, every cufflink, every pair of shoes. Someone in that room just painted a target on my door. Let's paint one on his. The screens flickered back to life. Outside, November rain started to fall, hard and cold, washing Chicago's streets clean for whatever blood would come next. And somewhere in the city, the traitor smiled, reached for a phone, and dialed the number that would try to kill Gertrude Whitacre before sunrise. The safe-house cot was too short. Gertrude's feet hung off the end like a child's. She lay fully dressed, boots laced, the .38 heavy under the pillow. 3:42 a.m., the 25th of November 2025. 6 days since she had last seen her own apartment, 6 days since she had believed distance could keep her safe. Luciano had sent her back tonight, insisted, actually. Dead men don't visit home, he'd said. If they're watching, let them see you walk in alone. Then we know who flinches. Bait. She was bait again. The building was quiet the way only old Chicago walk-ups get quiet after midnight. Radiator pipes ticking, a baby crying 2 floors up, the faint bass line of someone's insomnia leaking through thin walls. Gertrude lay still, counting heartbeats, listening for the wrong kind of silence. It came at 3:51. The hallway light outside her door flickered once, twice, then died with a soft pop. Not a brownout, someone unscrewing the bulb. She was off the cot before the darkness settled, gun already in her hand, bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. The apartment smelled of dust and yesterday's coffee. She moved to the window, eased the blinds apart with 2 fingers. Street below. Empty except for a parked van, engine off, no plates. 2 men on the sidewalk pretending to smoke. A third leaning against the buzzer panel like he belonged. Her phone buzzed once on the kitchen counter, Luciano's private number. They're inside. 3rd floor. Now. She didn't waste time answering. She was already at the door, ear pressed to the wood. Nothing. Then the softest scrape of a sole on linoleum. Someone taking the last stair slow, making sure it didn't creak. Click. The unmistakable metallic kiss of a round sliding into a chamber, inches from her door. Gertrude's pulse slowed to ice. She stepped back, raised the .38 two-handed thumb on the hammer. The doorknob turned a millimeter. Professional slow, listening. A bump key whispered in the lock. She never gave them the second turn. The door exploded inward, 2 figures in black balaclavas, suppressors extended like accusing fingers. The first one saw her, started to swing. Luciano came through the bedroom window behind her like a dark resurrection. Glass shattered. He landed in a crouch, coat flaring, pistol already coughing twice, pop-pop center mass on the first gunman. The second spun, suppressor spitting fire that chewed splinters from the doorframe beside Gertrude's head. She fired without thinking. The .38 roared, deafening in the small room, and the second man staggered, mask blooming red. Luciano didn't pause. He grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise and yanked her toward the window. Fire, escape, move. More footsteps thundering in the stairwell, 3, maybe 4. Coming fast. They hit the sash together. Cold November air slapped her face, rain mixed with sleet needling sideways off the lake. The ancient fire escape groaned under their weight. Luciano went first, gun up, scanning the alley. She followed, metal rungs burning cold through her socks. A muzzle flashed from her apartment window above silenced rounds, sparking off the railing, one tugging hot at her sleeve. She felt the burn, but no pain yet. Luciano fired blind up the ladder, 3 shots that bought them 4 seconds. They dropped the last 10 feet to the alley pavement, landing hard. Her knees buckled. He hauled her upright by the collar like a cat. This way. They ran. Back alley behind Thorndale, dumpsters overflowing, sodium lamps buzzing sickly yellow. A bullet whined off brick beside her ear. She risked a look back. 4 shapes spilling from the building's rear door, moving military smooth. Luciano shoved her left into a service cut between 2 6-flats. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire. He didn't slow hit it at a sprint, planted one boot halfway up, vaulted over like the wire was suggestion. Gertrude followed, coat ripping, skin ripping, blood hot on her forearm. They came out on Broadway, late-night traffic hissing past. A black sedan screeched to the curb door already open, engine snarling. Salvatore, Luciano's driver, face grim. Get in. They dove across the back seat as the rear windshield spider-webbed from a bullet that never arrived. Salvatore floored it before the door latched, tires screaming on wet asphalt. Gertrude lay half on the floor, chest heaving, blood slick on her fingers. Luciano pressed a folded handkerchief hard against the graze on her arm, eyes on the side mirror. Lost them at the light, Salvatore said. For now. Luciano didn't answer. He was looking at her at the blood, the shaking, the way her pupils had blown wide. She met his gaze and saw something raw flicker there. Not pity. Recognition. You came, she said, voice shredded. I said I would keep you alive. His thumb brushed the edge of the wound, almost gentle. I don't make promises I can't keep. The sedan merged onto Lakeshore Drive, city lights streaking across the windshield like comets. Behind them, red-blue flashes bloomed in the distance, police finally waking up to the war spilling onto their streets. Gertrude watched her building shrink in the rear window, a dark rectangle with one lit window now forever empty. She thought of the life that had lived there. Books on the nightstand she would never finish, the coffee mug with the chipped handle, the quiet dream of invisibility. All of it gone in muzzle flashes and broken glass. The realization settled in her bones, heavier than the gun still warm in her hand. She was not a bartender anymore. She was not a civilian caught in crossfire. She was the woman who had circled 3 sentences on a receipt and bound her fate to the most dangerous man in Chicago. And tonight, for the first time, she understood that surviving no longer meant getting away from Luciano Alvarez. It meant running beside him until one of them stopped breathing. She leaned her head back against the leather seat, closed her eyes, and let the city lights bleed red across her eyelids. In the front seat, Salvatore took a hard right, tires howling, carrying them deeper into the night. Behind them, sirens wailed like mourners too late to the funeral. The sedan left the city behind at 90 miles an hour, wipers fighting a losing battle against the sleet. Salvatore took them north along the lake, then west into the old industrial graveyard where Chicago used to build things. Chain-link fences sagged open like broken jaws. Warehouses stood blind and gutted, windows punched out years ago. The Calumet rail facility rose ahead of them, 300 acres of rust, silence, and forgotten freight cars. Salvatore killed the lights half a mile out. They rolled the last stretch on momentum and darkness, tires crunching over broken glass and ice. He stopped beside a derelict roundhouse, engine already cooling with metallic ticks. "Storm's got the drones grounded," he said. "No eyes in the sky tonight. I'll watch the road." Luciano nodded once. He and Gertrude slipped out into the wind. The air tasted of coal dust and coming lightning. Somewhere out over the lake, thunder growled like artillery warming up. They moved between rows of boxcars, shadows swallowing them whole. Luciano led her into the roundhouse itself, massive brick cathedral of rail, roof half collapsed, moonlight stabbing down in silver blades. Inside, the storm sounded closer, wind howling through broken clerestory windows high above. Pigeons scattered in panic. Water dripped from rusted turntable tracks, each drop echoing like a countdown. Luciano set a battery lantern on an overturned crate. Its cold white light carved their faces into something ancient and hunted. He spread the photographs across the crate like a deck of dead men's cards. "Talk me through it one more time," he said. Voice low, almost gentle. "Something is still wrong." Gertrude's arm throbbed where the bullet had kissed it, but the pain kept her sharp. She leaned over the images, rain drumming on the remaining roof panels overhead. She had looked at these pictures for 6 days straight. She knew every pixel. And then she saw it. Not in the face of the hitman. Not in the cufflinks or the shoes. In the reflection. One photograph wide shot of the dining room taken from the mezzanine camera. In the mirrored back bar, behind Luciano's booth, a man stood half-turned away from the lens. Victor Rossi. His hand raised to his ear, fingers splayed in what looked like casual adjustment. But Victor was left-handed. Every soldier in Luciano's crew knew that. Victor signed documents left-handed, shot left-handed, poured wine left-handed. The one time Gertrude had seen him nervous at last year's Christmas sit-down, he had cracked his knuckles on the left hand only. In the reflection, he was using his right. Because he wasn't adjusting an earpiece. He was pressing a finger to a throat mic. Transmitting. Gertrude's breath fogged in the cold. "It's Victor," she said. The name came out flat, inevitable. "He told them the exact second you stood up. That's why the second team hit my apartment tonight. They knew you'd come for me." Luciano didn't move for a long heartbeat. Then he reached out and touched the photograph, almost tenderly, the way a man touches a coffin lid. "Fratello mio," he whispered. Lightning forked outside, turning the world white for one frozen second. In that flash, they saw the silhouettes first 6, maybe 7 men slipping between the boxcars, moving in practiced wedges. Victor had come to finish it. Luciano killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed them. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "No," Gertrude said. She checked the 38 5 rounds left and stepped to his side. "Not anymore." Thunder cracked directly overhead. They moved deeper into the roundhouse, boots silent on cracked concrete. Rain began to slash through the roof in violent sheets. The temperature plummeted. Victor's voice echoed suddenly, amplified by the cavernous space. "Luciano, enough hiding. Come out and die like a man." Another flash of lightning. For an instant, the entire interior blazed, rusted locomotives frozen on parallel tracks, chains dangling from overhead cranes like nooses, puddles reflecting the storm's fury. Victor stood in the center of the turntable, armed men fanned behind him, rifles raised. Rain plastered his hair to his skull, ran in rivulets down the scar on his cheek. He looked like a drowned wolf. "You should have stayed dead the first time," he called. "The city's too small for both of us now." Luciano stepped into the open, hands empty, coat whipping in the wind. Jealousy? Victor? His voice carried without effort, calm as deep water. After all these years? Victor laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Jealousy? You think this is about feelings? He spat blood-tinged rain. You inherited the throne because of a name. I built it. Every dock, every union, every judge in Cook County, I bled for it while you played chess in corner booths. The old men wanted tradition. The young ones want money. I'm giving them both. He raised his pistol-chrome Desert Eagle, ostentatious as sin, and leveled it at Luciano's chest. And her? Victor jerked his chin toward Gertrude as she stepped out beside Luciano. She was supposed to be a ghost. One circled note, and she unraveled everything. I should have put the first bullet in her skull the night she poured your goddamn espresso. Lightning again. Thunder on its heels, so close the ground shook. Victor's men started to fan wider. Gertrude saw the math. 7 rifles against 2 pistols and 5 bullets. Luciano saw it too. He smiled, then small, terrible. You forgot the storm, Fratello. He flicked his wrist. Somewhere high in the rafters a fuse sparked. Salvatore had rigged the old crane magnets hours ago, when they first chose this place. The electromagnet slammed alive with a shriek of power. Chains whipped down like steel serpents, catching 2 of Victor's men across chest and throat, yanking them 20 feet into the air. Rifles clattered to the concrete. Chaos. Gunfire stuttered white in the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit the roundhouse like strobes. Gertrude dropped to one knee, fired twice center mass on the nearest shadow. The .38 bucked in her hand. Luciano moved like smoke, coat discarded, twin suppressed Berettas appearing as if conjured. He put 3 rounds into another gunman before the man could track him. Victor roared and charged straight through the storm, Desert Eagle barking. Bullets sparked off iron wheels and ricocheted wildly. Luciano took one in the side. Gertrude saw the impact spin him half around, blood blooming black across his shirt, but he kept coming, face carved from ice. Victor raised the eagle for the kill shot. Gertrude didn't think. She simply ran. 10 yards of open concrete, rain blinding, lightning turning every drop into silver shrapnel. She crashed into Victor low and hard, shoulder driving into his gut the way her brother had taught her for tackling drills when she was 15. They went down together, sliding across wet concrete. The Desert Eagle spun away. Victor backhanded her, stars exploded across her vision, but she held on, fingers clawing for the knife she knew he carried at his belt. He kneed her in the ribs, rolled, trying to pin her throat. Above them Luciano staggered forward, blood pouring between his fingers, Beretta raised in a shaking hand. Victor saw him, snarled, and drove his newly freed knife toward Gertrude's heart. Luciano fired once. The bullet took Victor in the shoulder, spun him off her. But momentum carried the knife downward. Gertrude twisted at the last second. The blade sliced air and buried itself in the concrete between them. She came up with the .38 pressed to Victor's forehead. He froze, rain streaming down both their faces. Do it, he hissed. Pull it. You're one of us now anyway. Gertrude's finger whitened on the trigger. Luciano's voice cut through the storm, raw and exhausted. No, he's mine. She lowered the gun. Luciano walked forward until the suppressor kissed Victor's temple. Blood soaked his left side, but his hand never wavered. Fratello, he said again, softer this time. You should have asked. The single shot was lost in the next crack of thunder. Victor's body dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Silence fell, broken only by rain and distant sirens. Luciano swayed. Gertrude caught him before he hit the ground, her arms around his waist, his blood hot against her skin. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle going slack with shock. Salvatore's silhouette appeared in the doorway, rifle sweeping the dark. "It's over," she told him. Luciano's head fell against her shoulder. His breath was warm against her neck, ragged. "You saved me," he murmured, the words slurred with blood loss and something that might have been wonder. "Third time," she answered, voice shaking. "We're even." He laughed once, wet, pained, real, and for the first time since she had circled those words on a receipt, Gertrude felt the bond snap into place like a lock turning. Not debt. Not alliance. Something fiercer. The storm began to ease, rain softening to a steady hush. Lightning receded eastward over the lake, taking the ghosts with it. In the sudden quiet, she could hear Luciano's heartbeat against her own two rhythms, learning to match. Whatever came next, police, power vacuums, wars yet unfought, they would face standing side by side. Because some lives are rewritten with ink. Others are forged in thunder and blood. And theirs had only just begun. The storm had spent itself by the time Salvatore turned the sedan onto a forgotten service road south of the city. Rain fell in thin, exhausted needles now, ticking against the roof like cooling shell casings. Behind them, the Calumet rail yard was already crawling with red-blue strobes. Police, fire, tactical units converging on the thunder that had drawn them like moths. Ahead lay only darkness and the faint sodium glow of Indiana refineries on the horizon. Gertrude sat pressed against Luciano's good side, one hand clamped over the folded towel Salvatore had shoved against the bullet wound in his ribs. Blood had soaked through the cloth, warm and slick against her palm. His breathing was shallow, controlled, but every exhale carried the faint copper scent of internal damage. He hadn't spoken since the roundhouse. Salvatore drove without lights, muscle memory guiding them through a maze of potholes and abandoned rail spurs. When they finally stopped, it was beneath the skeletal remains of a grain elevator, 300 feet of rusted steel and silence. The engine died. For a long moment the only sound was rain and the distant, dying wail of sirens. Luciano broke the quiet first. "Victor was the last of the old guard who still called me brother," he said, voice rough with blood loss and something heavier. "With him gone, the table is empty. Every lieutenant, every captain, every soldier who ever wanted more, they'll come for the chair tonight. By dawn, the city will be on fire." He turned his head slowly, eyes finding hers in the dim. "I just started a war I didn't choose." Gertrude felt the weight of that settle between them like another body in the car. Salvatore got out, boots crunching on gravel as he swept the perimeter with a rifle he didn't bother to hide. The driver's side door stayed open, a wedge of cold air cutting through the heat of blood and adrenaline. Luciano shifted, wincing, and reached across his body with his left hand to close the door. The movement tore the makeshift bandage. Fresh blood seeped between Gertrude's fingers. "Your apartment," he said. "It's gone. I had it burned while we drove. Evidence, loose ends, the life you kept there ash now. By morning it will look like a gas leak. No body. No questions. Just another tragedy in Edgewater." She should have felt something: grief, rage, violation. Instead, there was only a hollow ringing, like the moment after a bell has been struck and the vibration lingers in the bones. Everything she had been 21 days ago, Gertrude Lee, Whitacre, bartender, insomniac, invisible woman, was scattered across a scorched third-floor walk-up she would never see again. Luciano watched her face in the half-light. "I can still give you a way out," he said quietly. "New papers. A flight tonight to anywhere that doesn't speak Italian or English. Enough money to disappear for good. You walk away. You live. Quietly, carefully. But you live." He let that hang between them, the offer and the lie inside it. Gertrude looked down at her hand, still pressed to his side, slick with the blood of a man who had come to kill her, and died because she had circled 3 sentences on a receipt. She thought of Victor's final sneer. "You're one of us now anyway," and felt the truth of it settle in her marrow. "And if I stay?" she asked. Luciano's eyes never left hers. "Staying near me means danger. Every morning you open your eyes. It means learning to sleep with a gun under your pillow and a knife in your boot. It means becoming something the woman who wrote that warning would never recognize." His voice dropped, raw. "Staying away means death. They will find you eventually. And when they do, it will not be quick." He reached up slow, careful, and covered her blood-slick hand with his own. Not a romantic gesture. A vow. "I owe you a life," he said. 3 times over. "That debt doesn't expire. But I will not lie to you. The cost of collecting it is everything you have left to lose." Gertrude felt the tremor start in her knees and travel upward until her teeth nearly chattered. Not from cold. From the sheer, vertiginous drop of realizing the ground beneath her had vanished days ago, and she was only now noticing the fall. She thought of her brother's flag-draped coffin. She thought of the stranger's shoe left behind on Meridiana's marble. She thought of Victor's body cooling on wet concrete while lightning stitched the sky shut. And she thought of the man bleeding out beside her, the only person in the world who had come when she called, who had stood between her and death without hesitation. Fear was still there, sharp and bright. But beneath it ran something fiercer, the cold, clear recognition that she had already crossed the line. There was no path back to the woman who had once believed invisibility was the same as safety. She curled her fingers, pressing harder against his wound, feeling the stubborn beat of his heart through layers of muscle and will. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. The words came out steady. Final. Luciano studied her for a long moment, the winter lake in his eyes thawing by degrees. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Then, welcome home, Gertrude Whitacre." Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted just enough to reveal a thin blade of moon, silvering the rust and ruin around them. In the distance, Chicago burned quietly, sirens rising and falling like breathing. Salvatore climbed back into the driver's seat, glanced at them in the rear view, and started the engine without a word. The sedan rolled forward, tires hissing over wet gravel, carrying them toward whatever was left of the city and the war that now belonged to both of them. Gertrude leaned her head against Luciano's shoulder, careful of the wound, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, the trembling stopped. One circled warning had rewritten both their lives. And the war had only just begun.